I did something I can never take back. I looked a child in the eyes. A sweet, innocent little girl who had done nothing wrong, and I told her she was not welcome. Not with words. I didn't need words. The way I turned my body, the way I gripped my purse, the way my face twisted without me even trying to hide it. She saw all of it. She was 8 years old, and she saw every single bit of it. And the worst part? I felt righteous doing it. I felt like I was protecting something. Like I was right. I wasn't right. What happened after that moment? What that little girl did, what she said, what she gave me even after I treated her the way I did, broke something loose inside my chest that I had kept locked up for 61 years. And by the time I finally understood what she had been trying to give me from the very beginning, it was almost too late. My name is Dorothy Callahan. I am 63 years old. I live alone in a blue house on Sycamore Lane in Clover Falls, Ohio. I have a garden I don't tend to anymore, a cat named Biscuit who mostly ignores me, and a chair at my kitchen table where my husband Gerald used to sit every morning with his coffee and his newspaper and his terrible jokes that were never actually funny but always made me laugh anyway. Gerald has been gone for 2 years now, and before that little girl came into my life, I had made my peace with disappearing quietly. Not dying, just shrinking. Getting smaller and smaller until the world forgot I was there. I didn't think I deserved anything else. Not after what I had done. Not after the kind of woman I had spent most of my life being. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened on that bench at Riverside Park on a Tuesday afternoon in October, you need to understand where I came from. You need to understand the town I grew up in, the people who raised me, and the beliefs I swallowed so young and so deep that I stopped knowing they were even there. You need to understand that some poisons don't taste like poison. Some of them taste like home. If you're listening, help me prove something wrong. I was told this channel wouldn't reach 1,000 subscribers, but these stories deserve to be heard. If this matters to you, subscribe and help bring them to light. I was born in 1961 in a small town called Mill Haven, Georgia. My father was a man named Robert Earl Callahan, and he was, by every external measure, a good man. He went to church every Sunday. He paid his bills. He coached Little League in the spring. He brought my mother flowers on their anniversary without being reminded. People in Mill Haven loved Robert Earl Callahan. But inside our house, behind the screen door and the cheerful yellow curtains my mother sewed herself, my father said things. He said them casually, the way you talk about the weather. He said them at dinner, at breakfast, watching the evening news. He said them like they were simply facts about the world, as obvious and unchallengeable as the color of the sky. I won't repeat them here. I think you know what kind of things I mean. My mother never pushed back. She would just get quiet and busy herself with something, refilling a glass, checking something on the stove, folding a napkin that didn't need folding. Her silence felt, to my child's mind, like agreement, like confirmation, like those things my father said must be true, because she didn't argue, and my mother argued about everything else. I carried those things with me to school, to church, to every corner of my life. I carried them the way you carry a stone in your pocket. After a while, you stop noticing the weight. It just becomes part of how you walk. I am not telling you this to excuse myself. There is no excuse. I am telling you this so that when I describe what I did to that little girl on the bench, you understand that it didn't come from nowhere. It came from 61 years of a stone in my pocket that I never once stopped to pull out and look at. Gerald was different from my father. Or at least I told myself he was. We met in 1983 at a church picnic in Columbus, where I had moved for nursing school. He was tall and broad-shouldered with a laugh that came up from somewhere deep in his belly. He spilled lemonade on my white blouse within 4 minutes of meeting me and spent the next 20 minutes apologizing so earnestly that I had to forgive him just to make him stop. We were married the following year. Gerald was not a hateful man. He did not say the things my father said. But he was quiet in different ways, and sometimes quiet is its own kind of agreement. We lived in Clover Falls all our married life in a neighborhood that was, for most of those years, all white. Our church was all white. Our friends were all white. Our world was a very specific shape, and we built it that way without ever discussing it, without ever naming it, the way you arrange furniture in a room and then stop seeing it. We never had children. This was not a choice exactly, It was more like a grief we carried together without talking about it too much. Gerald threw himself into his work at the hardware store. I threw myself into mine at Mercy General Hospital. We were good to each other. We had a real marriage, a warm one. I loved him more than I have ever found words for. When he died, a heart attack, sudden, a Tuesday morning in March, he was just gone. Between one breath and the next, I felt the floor fall out of the world. Grief is strange. It makes you smaller in some ways and harder in others. In the first year after Gerald died, I stopped going to church. I stopped calling friends. I stopped going to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, which had been our routine for 20 years. I ate crackers and soup for weeks at a time. I watched too much television. I let the garden go. And something that had always been in me, that old stone in the pocket, that weight I'd carried since Millhaven, got heavier. Loneliness can do that. When you have nothing soft to bump against, the hard parts of you get harder. I started noticing things the way my father used to notice them. I would go to the grocery store and feel a bristling unease that I told myself was just grief, just anxiety, just the rawness of being a widow in a world that doesn't know what to do with widows. But it wasn't only that. I knew it wasn't only that. I just didn't want to look at it. Riverside Park is about 6 blocks from my house on Sycamore Lane. I started going there in the second year after Gerald died because my doctor told me I needed to walk, and the park was the only place that didn't feel completely hollow. There was a bench near the duck pond that Gerald and I used to sit on sometimes on Sunday afternoons, and even though sitting there hurt, it also felt like the one place in Clover Falls where I could breathe all the way down. I had a routine. I would walk one full loop around the pond, about a quarter mile, and then I would sit on the bench with my thermos of tea and watch the ducks. I did this every Tuesday and Thursday, weather permitting, from 2 o'clock to 3. I did not speak to people. People in the park mostly respected that. A nod sometimes, a smile, nothing more. I was there on a Tuesday in October exactly as usual. The trees were doing what Ohio trees do in October, blazing orange and red and gold in a way that always made Gerald say, "God's showing off again." I had my tea. I had my bench. I had my ducks. The park was mostly quiet. And then I heard small feet on the gravel path. She came around the bend near the big oak tree. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a bright yellow jacket with a broken zipper that flapped open at the bottom. Her hair was in 2 puffs on either side of her head, a little lopsided, like she had done them herself or someone had done them in a hurry. She had a backpack that was clearly too big for her, shaped like a strawberry. She was carrying a juice box, the straw already bent sideways. She was black. She was alone. And she was heading straight toward my bench. I felt it before I could even name it. That old bristling, that pulling in, that clutching of something. I straightened. I set my thermos firmly beside me, taking up more space than I needed. I looked out at the ducks with a deliberateness that was meant to communicate occupation. "I am busy. This bench is taken. Move along." She stopped right in front of me. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the pond. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Can I sit with you?" For words. Simple as morning. And what I did next, the way I looked at her, the way my expression moved, the way I shifted my body like the space beside me was something to be guarded. I am not proud of it. I will never be proud of it. I was 61 years old and she was 8, and I made her feel it. All of it. Years and years of a stone in my pocket, and I pointed it right at a child. She didn't cry. She didn't run away. She just stood there for a moment, looking at me with the most serious eyes I had ever seen on a little face, and then she sat down on the far end of the bench, not touching me, leaving a wide space between us, and she opened her juice box and looked out at the ducks. She sat with me anyway. I didn't speak to her. I finished my tea. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked home without looking back. I told myself I felt nothing, but that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and the look in her eyes, not hurt, not angry, just steady, stayed with me like a splinter I couldn't get to, like something had shifted in my chest, something small but irreversible, the way a single stone can start an avalanche that doesn't look like much at first. I did not know yet that I would see her again the following Tuesday. I did not know yet that she would ask the same question. I did not know yet that she was the loneliest person in Clover Falls. Lonelier even than me. And I did not know yet what she was carrying in that too big strawberry backpack, and what she had planned to do with it, and how close she had already come to a decision that would have changed everything forever. I did not know any of it yet. But she came back. And God help me, so did I. She was there before me. That was the first thing I noticed when I came around the bend near the big oak tree the following Tuesday. It was exactly 2 o'clock, same as always, and there she was, already on the bench, sitting on the far end, the same bright yellow jacket with the broken zipper, the same lopsided puffs in her hair. The strawberry backpack was on the ground between her feet, and she was holding a peanut butter cracker, eating it in tiny careful bites the way small children do when they are trying to make something last. I stopped walking. My first instinct was to turn around, go home, come back Thursday and hope she was gone. I am not proud of that either. But that is the truth of what I felt. That flicker of retreat, that desire to protect my bench, my ducks, my quiet Tuesday routine from this child who had no business disrupting it. But my knees had been bothering me all morning. The walk from Sycamore Lane to the park was 6 blocks. And 6 blocks is not nothing when you are 63 and grieving and your cartilage has been quietly filing a complaint for 3 years. I had already walked here. I was not walking back without sitting down first. So I kept going. She looked up when she heard my footsteps on the gravel. Her face did something careful and still. Not a smile exactly, not a frown, just a kind of watchful waiting, like an animal that has been startled before and is deciding whether to stay or run. She watched me walk all the way to the bench. She watched me set down my thermos. She watched me lower myself onto the other end, leaving the same wide space between us that she had left last week. Neither of us spoke. The ducks were having some kind of disagreement near the water's edge. 2 of them were chasing a third one in circles, and the third one kept doubling back in an indignant flapping spiral. Under different circumstances, Gerald would have had something to say about that. Looks like the Hendersons' HOA meeting, he would have said, and I would have told him that was not funny and then laughed anyway. I poured my tea and looked at the ducks and said nothing. The little girl finished her cracker. She brushed the crumbs off her jacket very neatly, very precisely, the way a child does when someone has taught them to be tidy. Then she reached into the front pocket of the strawberry backpack and pulled out a small, battered book. The cover was soft from handling. One of those composition notebooks with the black and white speckled cover, the corners bent and soft. She opened it to somewhere in the middle and picked up a stubby pencil from the pocket and began to write. I did not mean to look, but she was right there and I am only human. Her handwriting was large and loopy, the handwriting of someone still making friends with letters. She wrote slowly, pressing hard, her tongue just barely visible at the corner of her mouth, the way children's tongues go when they are concentrating on something. I looked away before I could read anything. We sat like that for almost 20 minutes. Me with my tea, her with her notebook, and the silence between us was not exactly comfortable, but it was not violent either. It was the silence of 2 people occupying the same space without demanding anything from each other. I had not had that kind of silence with another person since Gerald died. When she finally spoke, it startled me so much I nearly dropped my thermos. "Do you like ducks?" she asked. I looked at her. She was not looking at me. She was still looking at the pond, pencil resting against the page. "They're fine," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended, dusty from disuse. She nodded slowly, as if I had said something worth considering. "I like the brown ones better than the green ones," she said. "The green ones seem mean." I looked at the ducks. The 2 who had been chasing the third one were both green-headed. I almost said something. I stopped myself. I did not want to have a conversation with this child. I did not want to get pulled into anything warm because warm things end, and when they end the cold is worse than before. I poured the last of my tea and stood up. "Wait," she said. I stopped. I don't know why I stopped. Something in the word. Not demanding, not pleading, just a quiet single syllable with a whole room inside it. I looked at her. She was looking at me now, those same serious eyes from last week. Up close, I noticed things I hadn't noticed before. There was a small scar above her left eyebrow, thin as a thread. Her jacket sleeve had a smear of something purple near the cuff. Marker, maybe, or paint. Her shoes were clean but old, the kind of clean that comes from someone scrubbing them deliberately, trying to make old things look cared for. "You don't have to go yet," she said. "I'm not bothering you." It was the most matter-of-fact thing I had ever heard a child say. Not a request. Not a guilt trip. Just a simple statement of fact, offered gently, like a hand held out. I sat back down. I have thought about that moment many times since. Why did I sit back down? I have no clean answer. Maybe it was the knees. Maybe it was something in her voice. Maybe it was Gerald, whispering from wherever he had gone. "Sit down. Don't be a fool your whole life." "What's your name?" I asked. The words came out before I decided to say them. She looked back at the pond. "Amara," she said. "That's not an American name," I said. Came out sharp. Defensive. Old reflex. She turned and looked at me with an expression that was not angry but was not nothing either. "It is now," she said simply. "I was born in Cincinnati." I felt heat move up my neck. I looked at my thermos. "My name is Dorothy," I said, because it was the only decent thing left to say. "Like in The Wizard of Oz?" she asked. "Like my grandmother," I said. She considered this. "That's nice," she said. Being named after someone real. I did not learn much about Amara that second Tuesday. She was not the kind of child who spills herself all at once. She parceled things out in small careful portions like those crackers she ate, deliberately making things last. What I did learn was this. She was 8 years old. She went to Clover Falls Elementary, which was 4 blocks from the park. She liked the color yellow, which explained the jacket. She did not like math, but she loved reading, especially books about animals. She had a little brother named Marcus who was 5 and who she described, with great seriousness, as a lot. She did not tell me where her parents were. She did not tell me why she was at the park alone at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, when school let out at 3:15. She did not tell me what was in the notebook or why she carried it everywhere or why its cover was so soft and worn that the black and white pattern had faded at the center to something closer to gray. And I did not ask. I told myself I wasn't curious. That was a lie. I thought about her on Wednesday. I was pulling dead leaves off the back porch and I thought about the scar above her eyebrow and the smear of purple on her sleeve and the way she had said "it is now" when I questioned her name. So steady, so unbothered. Like she had answered that question before and had made her peace with the having to answer it. I thought about her at the grocery store on Wednesday afternoon. I was in the cereal aisle and I saw a box with a cartoon duck on it and I thought about her saying the green ones seem mean and something moved across my face before I could stop it. A smile, small and involuntary, gone almost before it arrived. I caught myself and put it away. She was just a child. Children came and went from that park all the time. She would lose interest by next week and go back to wherever she normally went after school, and that would be the end of it. I would have my bench back, my quiet, my ducks, my grief, undisturbed. That was what I told myself. Thursday I went to the park at my usual time and she was not there, and I was glad about that. I sat on the bench alone and drank my tea and watched the ducks and felt the gladness and also, underneath it, something else I did not name. I came home and watered the plants on the kitchen windowsill. 3 small potted herbs, parsley and basil and mint. The last living things in the garden I still tended to because they were inside and required almost nothing. Gerald had planted them originally. He'd had grand ambitions about cooking more. He had used the basil exactly once. I stood at the sink for a while after watering them. The late afternoon light was coming through the window in that particular October way, golden and slanted and a little sad. Biscuit jumped up on the counter next to me and I let him stay even though I normally don't allow that. "Gerald," I said out loud. I do that sometimes. Not praying exactly. More like narrating. Keeping him updated. "There's a little girl," I said. "She keeps sitting on our bench." I didn't say anything else. I just stood there in the golden light with Biscuit and the basil until the light went away. The following Tuesday I arrived at the bench at 1:55, 5 minutes early. She was already there. Same jacket. Same backpack. This time she had a small container of grapes, the red kind, and she was eating them one at a time with great concentration. She looked up when I came around the bend and something in her face opened a little. Just a small opening, just a crack of light under a door, and she looked back at the pond. I sat down. I poured my tea. "Hi, Dorothy," she said. "Hi, Amara," I said. And that was enough somehow. That was a whole thing, just those 4 words between us. We sat for a while. The ducks were calm today. The mean green-headed ones were nowhere near the brown ones Amara liked. The October air was colder than last week, and I noticed that Amara's jacket zipper was still broken, and underneath it she was wearing a short-sleeved shirt that was not enough for the weather. She wasn't shivering. She was holding herself in the careful way of someone who has decided not to shiver. "You're cold," I said. "I'm okay," she said. "Your jacket is broken." She looked down at it. "I know," she said. "My mom was going to fix it." I noticed the past tense. I filed it away without commenting on it. "You should have a warmer layer underneath," I said. "A sweater or something." She shrugged in the careful way children shrug when they don't want to explain something. "I'll be okay," she said. We were quiet again for a bit. Then she reached into the strawberry backpack. Not the front pocket this time, but the main compartment, unzipping it slowly, and she pulled something out and held it in her lap. It was a photograph. Old, or at least handled enough to look old. She held it with both hands, looking down at it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask," I said, which was not the same as saying I would answer. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she said. "When someone goes away." The question hit me somewhere behind the sternum. I looked at her. She was still looking at the photograph, not at me. "What do you mean?" I said carefully. She looked up then, and her eyes, those serious, steady, dark eyes, were full of something she was working very hard to hold in. "My mom died," she said. "4 months ago." The October air went very still, and before I could say a single word, before I could arrange my face or find any kind of language for what I was feeling, she opened the strawberry backpack all the way, and I saw what was inside. My hand went to my mouth. I finally understood why she had been coming to this bench, and I understood that I had almost turned her away from the one place she had left. I need to tell you what I saw in that backpack. But first I need to tell you that in 31 years of nursing at Mercy General Hospital, I saw things that would make most people's knees give out. I held hands through things I will not describe. I stood in rooms where the air changed when someone left it. I learned, over 3 decades, how to keep my face steady when everything inside me was not steady at all. That training did not help me on that bench. Because what I saw in Amara's strawberry backpack was not frightening in the way hospital things are frightening. It was frightening in a quieter, deeper way, the way an empty chair at a kitchen table is frightening, the way a coffee cup that still has someone's lip print on it is frightening. It was the kind of thing that reaches past your defenses because it doesn't look like a weapon. It looks like love. And love, when it has nowhere to go, is the sharpest thing in the world. The backpack was full of letters. Not 1 or 2, dozens, maybe more. Small folded squares of paper, some of them torn from notebook pages, some of them written on the back of receipts and grocery lists and school worksheets. They were packed in carefully, not stuffed, arranged the way you would arrange something precious, something you handled often and returned to its place with intention. Some of them were tied together in small bundles with rubber bands. Some were loose. All of them were worn at the folds from being opened and closed many times. And on the outside of each one, in the same large loopy handwriting I had seen in Amara's composition notebook, the handwriting of a child still making friends with letters, was a single word. Mama. Every single one. Every single letter in that backpack was addressed to her dead mother. I did not cry in front of her. I want to be honest about that. It was not grace or strength that kept my tears back in that moment. It was shock. Pure and simple, the body's way of buying time while the mind catches up. I sat very still with my hand over my mouth and I looked at those letters and I did not make a sound. Amara was watching me. She had stopped working hard to hold things in. Her eyes were wet now, shining in the October light, but she wasn't crying either. We were 2 people on a bench, both of us holding something back, neither of us quite ready to let the other one see it fall. I write to her, Amara said. Her voice was quiet and matter-of-fact, The same tone she used to tell me about Marcus being a lot and the green ducks being mean. Like she had made peace with the fact of this thing even though the thing itself was enormous. Every day, I write to her and then I come here and I read them to her. I lowered my hand from my mouth. Here, I said. Why here? She looked out at the pond. The brown ducks were gliding near the far bank, slow and unhurried. She used to bring me here, Amara said. Before she got really sick, we used to feed the ducks. She paused. She liked the brown ones too. Something cracked open in my chest. Not broke, cracked. Like the first split in ice when the season is changing. I felt it physically, a loosening, a shift. What was her name? I asked. Another question that came out before I decided to say it. Amara looked at me. Diane, she said. Diane Lawson. Diane. I turned the name over in my mind. Diane who liked brown ducks. Diane who brought her daughter to this pond. Diane who was gone at whatever age you have to be to leave behind an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old and a backpack full of letters you will never get to read. How old was she? I asked. 31, Amara said. 31. Gerald had been 67. 31 is not old enough for anything. 31 is not old enough to be a memory. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it in a way I had not meant anything in a long time. Not the reflex sorry, the social sorry you hand out like a receipt. The real one. The one that comes from knowing exactly how large the hole is that a person leaves. Amara nodded. She folded the top of the backpack closed again carefully the way she had opened it. She smoothed the flap with her palm. Then she sat back and looked at the ducks. Does it stop hurting? She asked again. The question she had asked before I saw the letters. I thought about lying. I thought about giving her the soft answer, the reassuring answer, the answer adults give children when they want the conversation to be over. It gets better. Time heals. She's in a better place. All those phrases we use like bandages on wounds that need something more than bandages. I looked at this 8-year-old child with her broken zipper and her cold arms and her backpack full of love letters to a dead woman, and I decided she deserved better than a bandage. No, I said. It doesn't stop. She looked at me. But it changes, I said. It starts out like someone is pressing on a bruise all the time every minute, and slowly it becomes more like the bruise is just there. You know it's there. You can feel it if you press. But most of the time you can breathe around it. She was quiet for a moment, thinking about this with that serious concentrated face. How long does that take? She asked. The changing part. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Ask me again in a few years. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. Something smaller and more valuable than a smile. A kind of recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has been told the truth when they expected comfortable fiction. We sat together for the rest of that hour. She did not take out any of the letters. She did not read to me, and I did not ask her to. Some things are private even when they are shared, and I understood instinctively that the letters were hers and her mother's, and my presence was beside the point of them, not inside it. But she talked. Slowly, in that careful parceling way of hers, she told me about Diane Lawson. Her mother had been a nursing assistant. I felt that land somewhere specific in my chest, given what I had spent 31 years doing, at a clinic on the east side of Clover Falls. She had worked double shifts sometimes to cover bills after Amara's father left, when Amara was 3 and Marcus was not yet born. She had been funny, Amara said, in the way where she made everything into a game, where she found the ridiculous thing inside every hard situation and held it up like a prize. She had been a good cook, specializing in exactly 2 things, lemon pepper chicken and boxed macaroni, and she had been completely unbothered by this limitation. 2 things done right beats 20 things done wrong, she used to say. She had gotten sick 14 months ago. Something in her blood, Amara said, using the careful vague language of a child who has heard adult words she half understands and half doesn't. She had been in and out of the hospital for most of the last year of her life. She had died on a Sunday morning in June at Mercy General Hospital, with Amara and Marcus and their grandmother at her bedside. I did not tell Amara that I had worked at Mercy General for 31 years. That felt like too much, too fast. But I filed it away, and I felt the world doing that thing it sometimes does, arranging coincidences like furniture, putting things where they need to be without asking your permission. Who do you live with now? I asked. My grandma, Amara said. Grandma Ruthie. A small pause. She's tired a lot. She's old. Not as old as you, she added with the devastating honesty of children. But pretty old. Does she know you come here? I asked. Amara picked at the rubber strap of her backpack. She knows I go to the park, she said. She doesn't know about. She gestured vaguely at the bag. The letters. I understood. There are griefs we keep private not because we are ashamed of them but because we are protecting them. Because the world has a way of handling tender things clumsily, and sometimes you need to hold your tender thing yourself for a while before you trust anyone else with it. Does your grandmother know how much you're hurting? I asked. Amara was quiet for a long moment. A duck on the far side of the pond called out. One flat, declarative sound, and then went quiet again. She's hurting too, Amara said finally. Mama was her daughter. She said it the way you say something you have spent time figuring out. Slowly, with weight. I don't want to make it worse for her. 8 years old. 8 years old and already swallowing her grief to protect someone else from having to feel more of theirs. I thought about my own mother, standing at the stove while my father said his terrible things, folding napkins that didn't need folding. I thought about all the ways women learn, early and in earnest, to make themselves smaller so that the people around them have more room. I did not say any of this to Amara, but I felt it moving through me, old and complicated, connecting things I had kept in separate rooms for a long time. When 2:50 came and I began gathering my things, Amara stood up too and put on her backpack, adjusting the straps with the automatic efficiency of someone who does this many times a day. Are you coming back Thursday? She asked. I looked at her. The afternoon light was doing the golden slanted thing again, and it caught in her eyes and made them warmer, less careful, more like what they actually were. The eyes of a child who was very lonely and very brave and very tired of carrying so much by herself. I come Tuesdays and Thursdays, I said. That's my routine. She nodded, satisfied. She started up the gravel path and then stopped and turned back. Dorothy, she said. What? Thank you for staying. She said it simply, without drama, without the manipulative weight that adults sometimes put on gratitude. Just a clean, honest thank you, placed on the air between us and left there. She turned and walked up the path before I could answer. I watched her go, the yellow jacket, the strawberry backpack, the lopsided puffs bouncing slightly with each step, until she went around the bend by the big oak tree and disappeared. I stood alone by the duck pond in the October light. I thought about 31 years at Mercy General Hospital. I thought about all the patients I had cared for, all the families I had guided through the worst hallways of their lives. I thought about Diane Lawson, 31 years old, dying on a Sunday morning in June while her daughter learned the shape of a world without her. And then a thought arrived that I was not prepared for, that came up from somewhere below conscious thought, from the place where truth lives before you are ready to look at it. What if I had been one of Diane Lawson's nurses? The thought should have been a comfort, the idea of connection, of having been present for something that mattered. But it was not a comfort, because if I had been Diane Lawson's nurse, I would have walked into that room carrying everything I carried. All of it. The stone in the pocket, the 61 years of my father's voice, the shape of the world I had built so carefully around myself. I would have walked into that room and Diane Lawson would have seen it on my face. The same way her daughter had seen it on my face, here at this bench 2 Tuesdays ago. I stood very still for a long moment. Then I walked home, and I did not feel righteous, and I did not feel like I was protecting anything. I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like I needed to change. But wanting to change and knowing how are two entirely different things. And what I did not know yet, what I could not have imagined standing there by that pond in my coat with my empty thermos, was that changing was going to cost me something. That before this was over, I was going to have to walk into a fire I had spent 63 years carefully walking around. And the one who was going to lead me to that fire was an 8-year-old girl in a broken yellow jacket, with a backpack full of letters her mother would never read. The Thursday after I learned about the letters, I brought a thermos of hot chocolate. I told myself it was practical, The temperature had dropped overnight, and Amara had been sitting on that bench in a short-sleeved shirt with a broken zipper doing the work of nothing against the Ohio cold. I told myself any decent person would do the same. I told myself it had nothing to do with her specifically, that if any cold child had been sitting on that bench I would have done the same thing. I was lying to myself and I knew it, and I brought the hot chocolate anyway. She was there when I arrived. Same bench, same end, same careful posture. Today she had added a thin gray hoodie underneath the yellow jacket, which helped somewhat and not enough. The strawberry backpack was between her feet. She was not writing in her notebook today. She was just sitting, hands in her lap, looking at the ducks with an expression I recognized. The expression of someone whose mind is somewhere else entirely, somewhere far away and interior, and whose eyes are just pointed outward in the meantime as a courtesy to the world. I knew that expression because I had worn it for 2 years. I sat down and set the thermos between us without saying anything. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. "Hot chocolate," I said. "It's cold." She looked at the thermos for another moment. Something moved across her face. A hesitation, a calculation, the brief arithmetic of a child deciding whether to accept something from a person who has not yet fully earned trust. I watched her work through it and I did not rush her. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you." I poured a cup and handed it to her. She held it in both hands the way you hold something you want to absorb completely, drawing the heat into her palms, and she blew across the top before she sipped it. Very careful, very deliberate. I poured my own cup of tea from the second thermos I had brought. I was not ready to give up my tea. Change only goes so fast, and we sat together in the Thursday quiet. "It has marshmallows," she said, looking into the cup with mild surprise. "The small ones," I said. "The big ones get soggy." She nodded gravely, as though I had said something technically sophisticated. "Marcus likes the big ones," she said. "But I think he's wrong." "He's 5, I said. "He'll learn." She almost smiled. Almost. Over the next 3 weeks, we built something. I am not sure what to call it exactly. It was too new and too strange to be a friendship in the way adults use that word, and it was too specific and too real to be something as vague as a connection. It was more like a structure we were both building from our own sides without discussing the blueprint, adding one piece at a time, testing each piece before trusting it with weight. I learned things about Amara Lawson in the way you learn things about careful people, sideways, gradually, through small details that accumulate over time into something like a portrait. I learned that she was in 3rd grade and that her teacher was named Mrs. Peterson, who Amara described as nice but loud. I learned that her best friend at school was a girl named Kezia who had moved away to Michigan in September, which was delivered as a neutral fact but landed, in context, like a small additional grief. One more person gone in a year already full of going. I learned that she made Marcus a peanut butter sandwich every morning before school because Grandma Ruthie's hands hurt too much to operate the jar reliably. I learned that she read to Marcus every night from a series of books about a dog who solved mysteries, and that Marcus always fell asleep before the mystery was solved, and that Amara always finished the chapter anyway even after he was asleep. That last detail lodged inside me and stayed. I told her things too. Not everything, not the deep things, not yet, but small things. I told her about Gerald's terrible jokes and she laughed, genuinely. For the first time I had heard. I told her about Biscuit and his aristocratic indifference to my feelings, and she said very seriously that cats were like that, but it didn't mean they didn't care, they just showed it differently. I told her I used to be a nurse and her eyes went wide. "At which hospital?" she asked. "Mercy General," I said. She went very still. "That's where my mama was," she said quietly. "I know," I said. And then, because she deserved honesty, I thought about that. She was quiet for a moment. The ducks moved slowly on the water. "Do you think you ever took care of her?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I saw a lot of patients over 31 years. I might have." She turned this over, the way she turned everything over, carefully, giving it the full weight of her attention. "I hope you did," she said. "I hope she had someone nice." The stone in my pocket shifted. I felt it move in a way it had not moved in 60 years. Not gone, not yet, but looser. Like something that had been embedded for so long it had started to feel structural was revealing itself, finally, as just a stone. Just a thing that could be removed. I did not deserve her saying that to me. Not yet. But I held it anyway. It was on a Thursday in early November, the fourth week of our bench routine, that I first met Grandma Ruthie. I had been thinking about her for a while. Thinking about this woman raising two grieving children on tired hands, absorbing her own loss at the same time, trying to hold a household together around a hole the shape of her daughter. I had been thinking about Amara making peanut butter sandwiches in the morning and reading to Marcus alone in the dark after he fell asleep and carrying those letters to the park alone to protect Ruthie from having to hold any more pain. I had been thinking that someone needed to check on all of them. Not in a social services way, in a human way. In the way neighbors used to check on each other before everyone got so afraid of everything that they forgot how. I was walking back from the park that Thursday, heading up Sycamore Lane toward my house, when I saw Amara half a block ahead of me, turning onto a street called Birch Court. I had not realized she walked this direction. I had assumed she went the other way, toward the elementary school side of the park. I almost called out to her. I didn't. I just walked, and the coincidence of our directions carried me around the corner onto Birch Court, and I saw her stop at a small greenhouse 3 doors down. She went up the porch steps, pushed open the door without knocking. Her own home, her key not needed, the door already unlocked, and disappeared inside. I stood on the sidewalk looking at the greenhouse. It was well kept but tired. The kind of house that had been loved for a long time and was now being maintained by someone with less energy than the house required. The flower boxes under the front windows were empty, the soil dark and bare. The porch railing had a section that leaned slightly outward. The welcome mat was so old the word on it had worn down to a suggestion. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I walked home. The next Tuesday I brought 2 thermoses of hot chocolate. I also brought a small paper bag from the grocery store on Cedar Street, inside which was a child's sweater I had found in the sale bin, navy blue, soft, with a small embroidered duck on the front breast pocket. I had stood in that store for 12 minutes arguing with myself about whether buying it was overstepping, whether it would embarrass her, whether I had any right to involve myself in the material circumstances of this child's life. I bought it anyway. I told myself Gerald would have told me to stop overthinking everything and just be kind. When Amara arrived at the bench and saw the paper bag, she stopped walking for a second. "What's that?" she asked. "Sweater," I said. "Duck on it. Seemed right." She sat down slowly and took the bag and looked inside. She pulled the sweater out and held it up and looked at the duck with an expression I cannot fully describe. Something between surprise and a very specific kind of longing. The look of someone who has been given something they needed but had stopped expecting anyone to notice they needed it. She put it on over her hoodie, over her yellow jacket, and it fit well enough. She smoothed the front with her palm, the same way she smoothed the flap of her backpack, gently, deliberately, making sure the thing was properly situated. "Thank you, Dorothy," she said. "It was on sale," I said, which was unnecessary, and she ignored it with grace. She reached into the strawberry backpack and took out the composition notebook. She opened it and wrote something at the top of a new page. I did not look, but a moment later she turned the notebook toward me. At the top of the page, in her large, careful handwriting, she had written, "Things that are good." Underneath it, as the first item on the list, Dorothy brought a sweater with a duck. I looked at that list for a moment. "Is that a new thing you're doing?" I asked. "Mama told me to," she said. "Before she died. She said when things feel too heavy, write down what's still good. She said you can always find something." She looked at the page. "Some days it's hard," she admitted, "but I always find at least one." I thought about Diane Lawson, 31 years old, sick and frightened and running out of time, finding enough clarity to give her daughter that specific gift, that particular tool. I thought about the kind of mother you have to be to think about your child's future coping mechanisms while you are in the middle of dying. I looked at my tea. I looked at the ducks. I added Diane Lawson to the list of people I wished I had known better. I met Grandma Ruthie the following Thursday. I had decided, without fully deciding, to walk Amara home. Not inside. I did not invite myself into anyone's house, but to walk the same direction and let what happened happen. We left the park together at 3 o'clock, Amara with her backpack and her layered warmth and her hot chocolate container rinsed and returned to me because she was that kind of child, and we walked along the edge of the park toward Birch Court. We talked about Marcus. He had apparently done something at kindergarten involving a jar of paste and a classmate's sneaker, the details of which Amara delivered with the exhausted affection of a much older sibling. I found myself laughing. Not the small involuntary flash I had felt in the cereal aisle, but a real laugh, out loud, surprising myself with the sound of it. It had been a long time since I had heard my own laugh and recognized it. Amara looked up at me when I laughed. She looked pleased in a private way, like she had been trying to get there. We turned onto Birch Court. Amara slowed naturally as we neared the greenhouse, and I slowed with her, and we were almost at the porch steps when the front door opened. Grandma Ruthie was smaller than I had pictured. I had imagined someone large and solid, built for endurance, the physical expression of survival. But Ruthie Lawson was a small woman in her late 60s, lean and slightly bent, with silver hair cut close to her head and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She was wearing a housecoat and slippers and carrying a dish towel, and she stopped in the doorway when she saw me, and her expression went through several things in quick succession. Surprise, assessment, caution, and then something slower and more careful underneath all of those. "Grandma," Amara said, in the particular tone of a child who is about to explain something and is choosing their words accordingly. "This is Dorothy. She sits at the duck pond." Ruthie Lawson looked at me. I was aware, suddenly and acutely, of who I was and what I looked like. A white woman in her 60s, standing on this black woman's porch, having spent weeks befriending her granddaughter without anyone's knowledge or permission. I was aware of what that could look like. I was aware that Ruthie Lawson had every reason to view me with suspicion. "Dorothy," Ruthie said. Her voice was low and measured. "How long have you been sitting at that duck pond with my granddaughter?" "About a month," I said. I did not offer excuses. She deserved directness. She studied me for a long moment. I stood straight and let her look. "Amara talks about you," she said finally. "She talks about you too," I said. "She loves you very much. She worries about you." Something crossed Ruthie's face. A flinch, soft and private. The flinch of a person who has been protecting others so long, they are startled to discover someone has been watching them need protection. "Come up on the porch," she said. "Not inside. The porch," which was exactly the right amount of trust for a first meeting between two strangers with a child between them. I came up on the porch. We sat in the two porch chairs, mismatched, one wooden and one plastic, while Amara went inside, and we could hear her talking to Marcus in the interior of the house, his 5-year-old voice rising in greeting and then falling into the cadence of being told about something, probably the paste incident at school. Ruthie Lawson looked out at Birch Court. "She goes to that pond to talk to Diane," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "I know," she said simply. "I've known for a while." I didn't stop her because... She stopped, pressed her lips together. "She needs somewhere to put it. And I can't always..." She stopped again. "You're carrying it too," I said. She looked at me. "She was my baby," she said. The 4 plainest words in the English language, and she said them like they weighed everything, because they did. We sat in silence for a moment. "My husband died 2 years ago," I said. "Gerald, I know it's not the same." "Nothing is the same as anything," Ruthie said. "Grief doesn't grade on a curve." She paused. "What did he die of?" "Heart attack," I said. "Fast. He was just gone." She nodded slowly. "Diane went slow," she said. 14 months. I thought slow would be better because we'd have time. Time to say things." Pause. "You still don't say everything." I thought about Gerald's last morning. His coffee. His newspaper. His terrible joke about the weather forecast that I had been too busy rinsing my cup to fully acknowledge. I thought about how I had kissed him on the cheek when I left for my walk and not turned back. "No," I said. "There isn't." We sat there together on that mismatched porch, 2 old women with our separate griefs and our shared understanding, and the late November light came down through the bare trees on Birch Court and lay across the porch floor in long pale strips. After a while Ruthie said, "You should come to dinner sometime." I looked at her. "Amara would like it," she said. "And I make more food than we can eat." "Habit from when?" She stopped. "Old habits." I thought about my kitchen table, Gerald's empty chair, my crackers and soup, biscuit on the counter with the basil. I'd like that, I said. It was the truest thing I had said in 2 years. And something about saying it, something about sitting on this porch on the street I had never been down before with this woman I had not known 3 weeks ago, felt like a door opening inside me. Not the kind of door that leads outside. The kind that leads deeper in, toward rooms you have been keeping locked because you were afraid of what you left in them. I was afraid. But Amara came back out on the porch then, Marcus attached to her hand. A small, serious-faced boy with his sister's eyes and a smear of something orange near his left ear. And he looked at me with the frank, unguarded assessment of a 5-year-old and said, "Are you old?" "Marcus," Amara said, with the patience of someone who has said his name in that tone many times. "Yes," I said. "Pretty old." He considered this. "Okay," he said, and climbed into Ruthie's lap with the absolute confidence of a child who has never once doubted his welcome there. I watched Ruthie's arms come around him automatically, pulling him in, her chin resting briefly on the top of his head with her eyes closed. Just 1 second, just a breath. And I saw in that 1 second everything she was holding and everything she was refusing to put down. I stood to leave. Amara walked me to the porch steps. "Dorothy," she said. "What?" She looked up at me with those steady, serious eyes. "I'm glad you didn't leave that first day," she said. "When I asked to sit with you, I opened my mouth, closed it, because the truth was collecting in my chest like water, pressing upward, and I was not ready yet. Not ready to tell her what I had felt in that first moment. Not ready to say out loud what I had done, what I had almost kept doing, what had been living in me for 60 years disguised as ordinary. Not yet, but soon, because some truths I was learning have their own timeline. And this one was almost ready. I walked home down Birch Court in the November dark, and I was not smaller than when I had arrived. For the first time in 2 years, I was exactly the size I was supposed to be. And behind me, from the greenhouse, I heard Marcus laugh at something, high and sudden and completely unguarded, and the sound of it followed me all the way home like a light left on in a window, like someone saying, "Come back. There is room for you here." I didn't know yet how much I was going to need that room. I didn't know what was coming. None of us did. Dinner at Ruthie Lawson's house was on a Friday evening in late November, the week after Thanksgiving. I had almost canceled 3 times. The first time was Monday, when I stood at my kitchen window with my phone in my hand and told myself that Ruthie was just being polite, that she did not actually want a stranger at her table, that I would be an imposition on a family still raw with grief. I put the phone down and went to water the herbs. The second time was Wednesday, when I got as far as finding Ruthie's number. Amara had written it on a torn notebook page in her large, careful handwriting and pressed it into my palm at the park like it was something official, something binding. And I held the number and thought about all the ways an evening like this could go wrong. What would we talk about? What would I say to Marcus? What if I said something wrong? Something that came out of me before I could catch it. Something carrying the old weight of who I used to be. I put the number in my coat pocket and went to bed. The third time was Friday itself, at 4 in the afternoon, when I was standing in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear to dinner at a house I had no business being invited to. And the absurdity of the whole situation landed on me at once. I sat on the edge of the bed and Biscuit jumped up beside me, and I said out loud to no one, "What am I doing?" Biscuit put his paw on my knee. He had never done that before. I looked at him for a moment. "Gerald sent you, didn't he?" I said. Biscuit removed his paw and began grooming himself with pointed indifference. I got dressed and went to dinner. I brought a pie, apple, from the bakery on Cedar Street, because I had not baked anything in 2 years and did not trust myself to start on a night that already had enough variables. I stood on Ruthie's porch with the pie box in both hands, and I could hear, through the door, the sounds of a household in motion. Something on the stove, Marcus's voice going at considerable volume about something that sounded like a disagreement over a television program. Ruthie's low response, and underneath all of it the particular warm smell of a home where real cooking was happening. Amara opened the door before I knocked. She had been watching for me. She was wearing a yellow dress instead of the yellow jacket, and her hair was done differently. For neat braids instead of the 2 lopsided puffs, each one finished with a small white bead. She had clearly been prepared for company, which meant Ruthie had prepared her, which meant this dinner mattered to Ruthie in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. "You came," Amara said, with a relief she did not try to hide. "I said I would," I said. She held the door open and I stepped inside Ruthie Lawson's house for the first time. It was a small house, the way houses are small when they have been filled up with life for a long time. Every surface held something. Photographs, small plants, a child's drawing pinned to the wall near the kitchen doorway, a basket of folded laundry on the armchair that had been moved aside to make room and not yet made it back to the bedroom. It was the particular organized clutter of a woman who managed a household alone and managed it well and simply did not have enough hours in the day for everything. The photographs stopped me. There were many of them in mismatched frames along the hallway wall. A gallery that had grown over decades rather than being arranged all at once. Ruthie at different ages, younger and younger as you moved along the wall. A man I didn't recognize who had Ruthie's eyes and Marcus's laugh in the set of his jaw. Ruthie's husband, gone now too, I would learn later. And Diane. Diane Lawson at 5, gap-toothed and incandescent. Diane at 15 in what looked like a school play costume. Diane at what must have been 20 or 21, in a hospital waiting room, laughing at something off camera with her head thrown back and her whole body committed to the laugh the way young people laugh when they don't know yet to conserve anything. Diane with a newborn Amara. Diane with a newborn Marcus. Diane at the duck pond. I stopped at that one. It was summer from the light. Diane was sitting exactly where Amara and I sat every Tuesday and Thursday, on our bench with a younger, rounder-faced Amara beside her, both of them looking at the water. Diane had her arm around Amara. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at her daughter with an expression that I recognized, not from my own motherhood, which never came, but from 31 years of hospital hallways. It was the expression of someone who knows they may not have enough time and is trying to memorize everything. "That's from 2 summers ago," Ruthie said behind me. I had not heard her come into the hallway. Before she got really sick. She loved that pond. "I know," I said. "Amara told me." Ruthie looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Come eat," she said. Ruthie Lawson cooked the way some women pray. Seriously, without shortcuts, with a full understanding of what was at stake. There was roast chicken with a dark, complicated gravy. There were green beans cooked low and slow with something smoky underneath them. There were sweet potatoes that Marcus had apparently helped mash, a fact he announced 3 times during the meal with escalating pride. There were rolls from scratch, slightly uneven, deeply good. I ate more than I had eaten at a single sitting in 2 years. Marcus talked for most of the meal. He had a 5-year-old's magnificent indifference to conversational turn-taking, and he delivered a continuous, associative monologue that moved from his kindergarten teacher to a cartoon he liked to a bug he had seen on the porch to a question about whether Dorothy had ever seen a real dinosaur, on account of her being old. Amara said his name in that tone 3 times. Ruthie hid a smile behind her water glass each time. I told him I had not personally seen a dinosaur but that I had seen some very old things in my time, and he asked what the oldest thing I had ever seen was, and I said without planning to, a man who loved me for 38 years. The table went briefly quiet. Marcus, unequipped by age to feel the weight of this, said, "Was he nice?" "Very nice," I said. "Terrible jokes, though." "What kind of jokes?" Marcus asked. I told him one of Gerald's jokes, the one about the duck who walked into a library, which is an old joke, a tired joke, a joke that has no business being funny. Marcus laughed so hard he nearly came off his chair. Amara smiled into her green beans. And Ruthie looked at me across the table with an expression I was not expecting. Something warm and evaluating at once. The look of a woman deciding something. After dinner, while Amara helped Marcus get ready for bed, I could hear his protests about toothbrushing floating down the hallway with the cheerful persistence of a child who raises the same objections every single night and never stops hoping for a different result. Ruthie and I sat at the kitchen table with decaf coffee and the apple pie, and we talked. Really talked. The way you talk when the performance part of the evening is over and you are both too tired and too real for anything but honesty. She told me about Diane's illness, about the months of diagnosis and treatment and hope and setback, the particular cruelty of a disease that gives you good weeks inside the bad ones so that you keep believing. She told me about explaining to Amara, who had been 7, what was happening, and how Amara had listened to the whole explanation without crying and then said very quietly, "I'm going to need a bigger notebook." Ruthie's voice broke, slightly, on that. She pulled it back. She told me that her own health was not strong. Her hands, which I had noticed, the careful way she held things, the slight tremor, were the beginning of something the doctors were still naming. She could not drive at night anymore. Getting through the school run and the cooking and the laundry and the homework and the bedtime routine used most of what she had each day, and by 9 o'clock she was done, hollowed out, running on the kind of empty that sleep only partially fixes. "I worry about Amara," she said. "She's too old for 8. You know what I mean?" "I do," I said. "She takes care of everyone." She took care of Diane at the end, not medical things, just, she would sit with her, read to her. She would tell Diane about the ducks. Ruthie paused. "I think she started going to the pond because she needed somewhere that was both of them together. Somewhere she could still talk to her. She told me about the letters," I said carefully. Ruthie nodded. "I know about the letters. I found one once, left on the kitchen table by accident. I put it back in the bag without reading it." She looked at her coffee cup. "Some things belong to the person who wrote them." I thought about what a particular kind of love that was, to find your granddaughter's private grief and leave it untouched, to protect even the parts of someone you loved that excluded you. "You're a good grandmother, Ruthie," I said. She looked at me steadily. "I'm a tired one," she said. "There's a difference." She paused. "But thank you. I helped wash the dishes." Ruthie tried to tell me not to, and I ignored her, which she seemed to appreciate. We worked side by side at the sink. She washed, I dried, neither of us talking much, and there was something comfortable in the silence, something that felt less like two strangers being polite and more like two people who had already moved past the part where you perform for each other. Amara came back from getting Marcus settled and stood in the kitchen doorway watching us. She had her notebook in one hand and her pencil in the other, and her expression was private and warm and complicated all at once. The expression of someone watching something they had hoped for and are now adjusting to the surprise of getting. She went to the table and wrote something in the notebook. I did not look. Later, when I was putting on my coat in the hallway, she showed me the page. "Things that are good," the heading said. Underneath it, in today's section, below, Marcus helped mash the potatoes and Grandma made the gravy right this time. Dorothy came to dinner. She told Marcus Daddy's duck joke and he laughed the right way. I stopped moving for a moment. "What does the right way mean?" I asked. Amara thought about it. "Like it's the first time you ever heard something funny," she said. "Marcus laughs like that at everything. Mama used to say that was his superpower." I folded the coat over my arm. I was not going to cry in Ruthie Lawson's hallway. I was not. "Your mama sounds like she was something else," I said. "She was everything," Amara said simply. December arrived and the pond froze at the edges, and I started bringing a blanket to the bench along with the hot chocolate, which Amara accepted without comment as though this had always been the arrangement. We shared the blanket across our laps, a plaid wool one that had been in my hall closet since Gerald bought it for a football game 15 years ago, and we watched the ducks navigate the freezing water with the philosophical resignation of creatures who have committed to a particular habitat and see no point in complaint. I had started cooking again. Not because I planned to. It happened gradually, the way things that are actually healing happen, without announcement, without drama, without you noticing until you are already doing the thing you could not do before. I made soup. Real soup from scratch, not the canned kind I had been eating for 2 years. I made a pot of vegetable beef on a Sunday afternoon and it lasted 4 days, and on the 5th day I made more. I brought a container of it to Ruthie's on a Wednesday evening. Not a planned visit, just a drop-off, leaving it on the porch with a note, and Amara texted me from Ruthie's phone the next morning. Grandma said it was the best soup she had in years. Marcus ate 3 bowls and then asked if you were magic. I read that text standing at my kitchen window and felt something warm move through me that I had no name for and did not try to name. I was also, in those December weeks, beginning to look at something I had been turning away from for 60 years. I am not sure I can explain how that process works from the inside. It is not like deciding to clean a room. You do not simply choose to open the door and begin. It is more like the room starts becoming visible through the walls. You start seeing the outline of it. You start knowing, with increasing certainty, that the door is there and that you will have to open it eventually, and that what is inside is not a monster but simply a mess. A long accumulation of things you put in there because you did not know where else to put them and left and let settle into something solid. I thought about my father. I thought about his voice at the dinner table. I thought about the way I had learned to hear the world through ears that had been tuned to a specific frequency, one that sorted and divided without asking permission, that generated feelings before thoughts and called those feelings instinct and called that instinct safety. I thought about Amara's face when I had bristled on that bench the first day. That steady, unsurprised look. The look of a child who had encountered this before, who had already, at 8 years old, developed the ability to absorb it without collapsing. That thought made me feel sick in a way no amount of Gerald's reassurance had ever made me feel sick, because Gerald was gone, and the only voice in my head now was mine, and I could not tell myself comfortable things and have someone else's love make them feel true. I had to make them true myself. On the second Thursday of December, Amara arrived at the bench later than usual. It was nearly 2:30 before I heard her feet on the gravel, and when she came around the bend, she was not walking with her usual deliberate pace. She was moving fast, almost running, and her face was wrong. Closed in a way it never was at the park, tight around the eyes and mouth, like something was being held behind it at great pressure. She sat down hard on the bench. She did not reach for the hot chocolate. She did not take out the notebook. She put the strawberry backpack in her lap and wrapped both arms around it and looked at the pond with the expression I now recognized as Amara at her maximum capacity. The expression that came right before the thing she was holding became too heavy to hold. "Amara," I said. She shook her head. "Not yet." I waited. The ducks moved. The December air was sharp and still. After a long moment she said, "Someone at school said something." I waited. "They said," she stopped. Started again. "There's a boy in my class named Tyler. He said that my mama probably died because God didn't want her anymore." Her voice was flat and careful, delivering the information precisely, the way you handle something explosive. "He said it in front of everyone at lunch." The bench was very still. "What did you do?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "I just sat there." Her arms tightened around the backpack. "I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and finished my lunch." I looked at her. This child who had carried her grief alone to protect her grandmother, who made sandwiches and read bedtime stories and kept a list of good things on the worst days, who had asked to sit beside a woman who had shown her nothing but coldness and had sat there anyway, steady and unbothered, because she had already learned that some people's fear was not her problem to solve. "That was a cruel thing for him to say," I said. "It was wrong and it was cruel and it was not true." "I know," she said, but her voice was thin. "Your mother died because she was sick," I said. "That is all. There was no reason. There was no judgment. She was 31 years old and she was sick and the sickness won. That is the only story." Amara's arms tightened further around the backpack. "I know," she said again. And then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it beneath the December wind, "But sometimes I think, what if she knew she was leaving and she didn't fight hard enough? What if she—" She stopped. Her face broke. Not slowly. All at once, the way a window breaks, everything held, and then not held at all. She bent forward over the backpack and cried in a way I had not seen her cry before. Not the contained shimmer of those first weeks, but something deeper and older. Something that had been waiting a long time for the right moment and the right person to come out in front of. I put my arm around her. I did not think about it. I did not calculate it. My arm went around this child's shaking shoulders and I pulled her gently toward me, and she turned into me the way children turn into comfort when they finally find it. Completely, without reservation. And she cried into my coat with her arms still wrapped around the backpack full of letters to her mother. I held her and the ducks moved on the dark water and the December sky went pale and low overhead, and I thought about all the years I had spent with a stone in my pocket. All the weight I had carried in the wrong direction. All the warmth I had turned away from because I had been taught that turning away was the same as protection. I thought about what I had almost done to this child. What I had almost taken from both of us. And I made a decision. There on that bench, with Amara's grief soaking into my coat, and her trust sitting in my arms like something I did not deserve but was going to spend the rest of whatever time I had trying to be worthy of. I was going to tell her the truth. Not today. She had enough for today. But soon. Because she deserved to know who I had been. And I needed to say it out loud to someone who had every reason to walk away, and find out whether she would. I held her until the crying slowed and then stopped, and she sat up and wiped her face with her sleeve and took a very deep breath and let it out. Better? I asked. She considered honestly the way she considered everything. A little, she said. She reached into the front pocket of the backpack and pulled out the composition notebook. She opened it to today's page. She wrote something slowly, pressing hard. Then she showed me. Things that are good. Dorothy held me. I didn't fall. I looked at those 3 lines for a long time. The truth was coming. And it was going to cost me everything. And I was going to tell it anyway. I told her on a Tuesday. The last Tuesday before Christmas. When the park was quiet and the pond had a thin skin of ice all the way across it for the first time that winter, and the ducks had moved to the unfrozen patch near the far bank where a small stream fed in and kept the water moving. The sky was the color of old pewter. The bare trees stood along the path like witnesses. I had rehearsed it. I want to be honest about that. I had stood in my kitchen on Monday evening with biscuit on the counter and Gerald's basil on the windowsill, and I had said the words out loud to the empty room. Finding the shape of them, testing whether I could get through them without losing myself entirely. I had practiced the way you practice something you are afraid of, not to make it easier exactly, but to prove to yourself that it is possible, that the words exist, that they can be said by a human mouth and survived. I had not slept well. I arrived at the bench at 1:50, 10 minutes early. I set the thermoses down. I put the plaid blanket across both our sides of the bench. I sat with my hands in my lap and I watched the ducks on their unfrozen patch of water, and I thought about Gerald, and about my father, and about 63 years of being a particular kind of woman, and about an 8-year-old in a yellow jacket who had asked to sit beside me and changed the entire direction of what remained of my life. Amara came around the bend at 2 o'clock exactly. She was wearing the navy sweater with the duck on it over her hoodie over her yellow jacket, and she had added a knit hat that was slightly too big and sat low on her forehead, and she was carrying the strawberry backpack and a small paper bag that turned out, when she sat down and opened it, to contain 2 gingerbread cookies wrapped in a napkin. She held one out to me without a word, the way people who have become comfortable with each other offer things, without ceremony, without making a production of the kindness. I took the cookie. I held it. I did not eat it yet. She settled in under her side of the blanket and poured her hot chocolate and looked at the ducks. The ice is all the way across today, she said. Almost, I said. There's a gap on the far side. She looked. The ducks found it, she said, satisfied. Ducks are smarter than they look, I said. She considered this. Most things are, she said. We sat quietly for a few minutes. I could feel the words inside me, arranged and waiting. I could feel the particular quality of what I was about to do, the irreversibility of it. Once I said this, I could not unsay it. Once she knew who I had been, she would always know. And I would find out, finally, whether kindness was something that could survive the full truth of the person receiving it. Amara, I said. She said, drinking her hot chocolate. I need to tell you something, I said. And I need you to let me finish before you say anything, because if I stop, I don't think I'll start again. She lowered her cup slowly and looked at me with those serious eyes. She read my face the way she always did, carefully, completely, giving it her full attention. Then she nodded once. I took a breath. The first day you came to this bench, I said, and you asked if you could sit with me, I didn't want you to sit with me. Not because I was tired or grieving or having a bad day. I paused. Because of who you are. Because of what you look like. I kept my eyes on the frozen pond. I was raised to feel a certain way about people who look like you. And I carried that feeling for 60 years without ever stopping to really look at it or name it for what it was. And when you walked up to this bench that day, I felt it. And I let you feel it too. The park was very quiet. I watched your face change when you saw mine, I said. You were 8 years old and I pointed 60 years of ugliness at you without saying a single word, and you felt every bit of it. And then you sat down anyway. And I have thought about that every single day since. I stopped. I made myself look at her. Amara was looking at the pond. Her hands were wrapped around her cup. Her face was doing the careful, still thing it did when she was processing something. Giving it the full weight of her attention, turning it over, not rushing to a response. I know, she said quietly. I know you know, I said. That's the part one can't forgive myself for. That you were 8 years old and you already knew. That it wasn't even a surprise to you. She was quiet for a moment. It's not the first time, she said simply. Those 4 words. The most devastating thing she had said to me, and she said them the way she said everything, matter-of-factly, without drama, with the steady acceptance of someone who has already done the work of understanding something that should never have required understanding. I know, I said, and I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that asks you to make me feel better about it. Just I am sorry. For what I did. For being that person. For making you feel it. Amara turned and looked at me then. Fully, directly, the way she had looked at me that very first day on the bench. That look that went past the surface of things and found whatever was underneath. Did you mean it? She asked. When I sat down, did you mean it like you wanted me to go away? Or did you mean it like you were scared? The question stopped me. I had not expected it. I sat with it for a moment, refusing to answer quickly, giving it the honesty it deserved. Both, I said finally. And I know that doesn't make it better. She nodded slowly. She looked back at the pond. My mama used to say, she began and then paused, the way she always paused when she was about to say something that came from Diane. Gathering it carefully, making sure she had it right. She used to say that people who are mean to you because of how you look are mostly just afraid. She said fear makes people into something smaller than they actually are. Pause. She said you have to decide whether to be afraid back or just to be bigger than the fear. I thought about Diane Lawson at 31, sick and running out of time, still finding the words to give her daughter, still building her up for a world she would have to navigate without her. She was right, I said. I know, Amara said. She usually was. We sat for a while without speaking. A bird landed on the ice at the edge of the pond, tested it with 1 foot, found it unsatisfactory, and left. The gingerbread cookie was still in my hand, uneaten. Then Amara did something I was not prepared for. She reached into the strawberry backpack. Not the front pocket, not the main compartment, but a small side zip pocket I had never seen her open, and she took out a single folded piece of paper. Not from the bundle of letters. A separate piece, newer looking, the fold crisper, handled less. She held it in her lap for a moment. I wrote this last week, she said. I wasn't going to show you, but I think I should. She held it out to me. I took it with both hands. I unfolded it carefully. It was written in her large looping handwriting, in purple marker this time instead of pencil, pressing hard the way she did when something mattered. Dear Mama, I made a friend. Her name is Dorothy and she is old and she has a cat named Biscuit and her husband died and she used to be a nurse. She brings me hot chocolate and she got me a sweater with a duck on it. She came to dinner and made Marcus laugh the right way. I think she was lonely like me. I think that's why she was mean at first. She was scared and the scared made her small and I decided to be bigger. I think you sent her, Mama. I think you saw me at our bench and you knew I needed someone and you sent me Dorothy. That's the kind of thing you would do. I miss you so much it feels like a hole in the middle of me. But Dorothy sits next to the hole so I don't fall in. Love, Amara. I read it once. I read it again. And then I stopped being a woman who did not cry in front of people. It came up from somewhere so deep I could not have stopped it if I had tried. Not the polite, manageable grief I had allowed myself in private for 2 years, but something older and larger, something that had been waiting behind it. 60 years of a stone in a pocket. 31 years of hospital hallways. Gerald's empty chair. The garden I had let die. The way I had felt righteous on this bench when I had no right to feel anything but ashamed. And Amara, in her too big hat and her duck sweater, put her small hand on top of mine. She did not say anything. She just put her hand there and left it, the way I had put my arm around her 3 weeks ago, without calculation, without hesitation, simply because it was the right place for it to be. We sat like that while I cried. and the ducks moved on their patch of open water, and the December sky pressed low and silver over Clover Falls, Ohio. When it passed, and it did pass the way all things pass eventually, I folded the letter back along its creases and held it out to her. She shook her head. "You keep it," she said. "Amara, I wrote it to Mama," she said. "But I think it was also for you." She picked up her hot chocolate. "Mama always said some things are for more than one person." I held the letter. I folded it once more and put it in my coat pocket, next to my heart, which is where it has been every day since. I went to see Ruthie that evening. I told her everything, the same way I had told Amara, from the beginning, without softening it, without the comfortable edits we apply to our worst moments to make them survivable at dinner parties. I told her about my father and Millhaven, Georgia. I told her about the stone in the pocket and the 60 years of carrying it. I told her what I had felt on the bench that first day and what I had let Amara see on my face. Ruthie Lawson listened to all of it without interrupting. She sat at her kitchen table with her decaf coffee, and she listened with the same complete attention her granddaughter used. The full, unhurried, nothing-wasted attention of a person who understands that some things need to be heard properly. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you trusted me with your grandchildren," I said. "And you deserve to know who you trusted." She looked at her coffee cup for a long moment. "Who you were," she said. Past tense. She looked up. "Are you still that person?" I thought about it honestly, the way she deserved. "I don't think the feelings disappeared," I said. "I think they're still in there somewhere, old and stubborn. But I see them now, and seeing them is different from being them." I paused. "I'm working on it. Every day." Ruthie was quiet for another long moment. Then she said, "My husband Leonard used to say that the most dangerous people aren't the ones who are broken. They're the ones who are broken and don't know it." She turned her coffee cup slowly on the table. "You know it, Dorothy. That's not nothing." "It's not enough either," I said. "No," she agreed. "But it's where you start." Christmas that year was at Ruthie's house. I want you to understand what that meant. I had spent the previous 2 Christmases alone in my house on Sycamore Lane with biscuit and crackers and a television I left on for noise. I had watched other people's lights come on in the evening up and down the street and felt the particular December loneliness that is sharper than any other kind because the whole world is insisting on togetherness and you are not together with anything. This Christmas I brought apple pie and a pot of soup and a small gift for Marcus. A book about a dog who solved mysteries, since Amara had told me he always fell asleep before the ending and deserved his own copy, and a new composition notebook for Amara, this one with a yellow cover, because yellow was her color and she had nearly filled the old one. Marcus opened his gift and immediately demanded that someone read it to him right now, immediately before dinner, a request that was denied with the practiced efficiency of a household that had learned to manage him. He accepted this with 5-year-old dignity and spent the next 10 minutes showing the book to Biscuit, whom I had brought in his carrier at Amara's specific invitation, and who bore the attention with his characteristic aristocratic suffering. After dinner, after the dishes, after Marcus had been put to bed with 3 chapters of Dog Detective, Ruthie and Amara and I sat in the living room under the small Christmas tree that leaned slightly to the left because Marcus had rearranged the ornaments on one side and they had decided to leave it that way. Amara had her new yellow notebook open in her lap. She was writing her list. After a while she looked up and turned the notebook toward me and Ruthie so we could both see. Things that are good. The list went down the whole page. At the very bottom, underlined twice. Everyone I love is in this room. Ruthie made a sound beside me. Small, caught, quickly held. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. I put my hand on her arm and left it there. Amara looked at both of us. Then she looked at the leaning Christmas tree with its lopsided ornaments and the cat in the carrier and the soup pot still warm on the stove and the hallway full of photographs of Diane Lawson laughing with her whole body. "Mama would have liked this," she said softly. Not sadly or not only sadly, with the particular bittersweet certainty of someone who knew the person they were talking about well enough to be sure. "She would have," Ruthie said. Her voice was steady. "She does," I said. And I meant it in whatever way it is possible to mean something you cannot prove, in the way that Amara had meant it when she wrote, "I think you sent her, Mama." In the way that some things are true not because they can be verified but because the alternative, a world without that kind of connection, that kind of reaching across, is a world too cold to survive in. I am Dorothy Callahan. I am 63 years old. I still live in the blue house on Sycamore Lane, but the garden is not dead anymore. I started it again in March, slowly, one section at a time, learning again which things survive Ohio winters and which things you have to replant from scratch. Amara helps on Saturday mornings sometimes, kneeling in the dirt with complete seriousness, pressing seeds in with her thumb at the exact depth the packet specifies, because she is the kind of person who reads instructions and follows them precisely. Marcus mostly digs holes for reasons he cannot fully explain. I have decided this is fine. Ruthie's hands are worse some days and better others. On the bad days I drive Marcus to school because Ruthie cannot manage the car and Amara cannot manage it either, being 8, and will not be able to manage it for some time. On the good days I come for coffee and we sit on her porch in the cold and talk about everything and nothing, the way old friends do. I am still working on the stone in the pocket. I want to be honest about that. I do not get to declare myself healed and close the chapter on 60 years of carried weight. There are still moments, a reflex, a bristling, an old thought moving through me before I can catch it. And each time I see it, I name it and I put it down deliberately, the way you put down something you have been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. It is slow work. It is the most important work I have ever done. It is harder than 31 years of nursing and lonelier in some ways because you do it mostly inside yourself, in the rooms you kept locked for too long. But I have people to come home to now. A greenhouse on Birch Court with a leaning Christmas tree and a pot of something always on the stove. A little girl who keeps a list of good things on the worst days and has never once stopped finding at least one. A small boy who laughs like it's the first time at everything. A woman with silver hair and steady eyes who told me that knowing you're broken is where you start. And Gerald's basil is still on the windowsill. Still alive. Still fragrant when I brush past it in the mornings on my way to pour the coffee I now sometimes drink at a table that does not feel entirely empty anymore. I did something I can never take back. I know that. I will always know that. There is no version of the story where I go back to that first Tuesday and the look on my face is something different, something kinder, something worthy of the child who walked up to me with her broken zipper and her juice box and asked the simplest question in the world. But there is this version. The one where she sat down anyway. The one where she came back. The one where she showed me, without ever once raising her voice or demanding anything, that the biggest thing in the world is not hatred or fear or grief or loneliness or 60 years of a stone in a pocket. It is a child who decides to be bigger than all of it, and asks, with nothing but gentleness, "Can I sit with you?" And because she asked, and because she stayed, everyone in that park, everyone on Birch Court, everyone in the blue house on Sycamore Lane learned what it means to finally, truly sit together. The end.